New Year's Eve turned hellish when I saw my wife's lips lock with my boss's. The clock struck midnight. My life struck disaster. Just one night, she claimed, tearing our world apart. Through deceit, legal battles, and raw heartache, watch my relentless fight to salvage my family and my sanity. And this is my fight back from betrayal. Enjoy watching it.
My name is Mike Wilson. I used to think my life was pretty good until one night everything turned upside down. I felt like I lost everything important to me or was about to lose it. Despite this, I found comfort in a Bible verse that says luck and time affect everyone. I married Jenny Smith 3 months after we graduated from college, and we had been married for over 7 years when she betrayed me. I looked back over our time together and saw no signs that my life was about to fall apart. I was shocked. Jenny and I met at college. She was attractive, about 5 feet 6 inches tall, with brown hair and bright green eyes. I thought she was nearly perfect, rating her a 9 or 9.5 out of 10. Jenny had a way of drawing people to her. From the moment we met, we clicked and shared similar goals, or so I thought. We dated, got married, and I landed a good job just before I graduated. Everything seemed great for our future. However, Jenny hesitated to introduce me to her parents, John and Alma. I didn't meet them until I insisted before our wedding. It turned out Jenny was embarrassed by her poor background. When I met them, I found them to be wonderful and caring people. They had little, but they shared what they had. I lost my parents when I was young, so I grew close to John and Alma. They lived in a modest, small house in an old neighborhood. The house was simple but neat, with John taking care of the exterior and Alma keeping the inside tidy. Over the years, Jenny distanced herself from them, which often led to arguments when I brought them up. So I just kept in touch with them without making a fuss. I would call them weekly and sometimes get Jenny to talk to them. I also helped out when needed. Like when John's lawnmower broke, I replaced it for him. I worked as a staff accountant in a company with locations across several states and countries. Despite being new, I earned a good salary. A few years later, when our department manager retired and I passed my CPA exam, I was promoted. My new position increased our income significantly, allowing us to live more comfortably. Jenny and I had twins, a girl and a boy, soon after our wedding. At first, Jenny wasn't thrilled about being pregnant so soon, but she later embraced motherhood. Once the twins started kindergarten, Jenny wanted to work and got a job at a law firm, despite my worries about workplace affairs. Luckily, her boss, Clem Flint, was an older man devoted to his family, which eased my concerns. Paul and Jenny had been happily married for 6 years. Paul was a devoted Christian and valued a stable, prank-free life. They had a lively family life with their 2 children, and everything seemed great. But one day, Jenny started acting differently. She snapped at their daughter Glenda over a small thing like a plate left in the sink. When Paul asked her what was wrong, Jenny broke down. She confessed that she felt trapped in her roles as a wife and mother and lamented the dreams and opportunities she felt she was missing out on. She expressed her frustration about their financial limits and described her life as unsatisfactory. Paul was taken aback. He thought Jenny might be experiencing a midlife crisis and suggested seeing a counselor, but Jenny reacted badly. She insisted she wasn't crazy, but simply wanted a better life. Following this, she kept her distance from Paul and the children for several weeks. After a while, Jenny seemed to return to her normal self, and their family life resumed its happy routine. Paul believed these were just temporary issues and remained committed to Jenny through thick and thin. He spent as much time as possible with their children, who were confused by their mother's mood swings. Paul assured them that their mother loved them deeply, no matter her mood. Paul often planned outings with the children, sometimes without Jenny if she preferred to stay home. These trips brought them joy, especially when Jenny joined and was in good spirits. Things improved further after a company picnic on Independence Day, which Jenny actually looked forward to. After this, their relationship seemed better than ever, including their intimate life. However, everything changed at the company's New Year's Eve party. Normally, Paul and Jenny skipped it because they didn't enjoy the heavy drinking and wild behavior. But this year, Jenny wanted to go, claiming she missed dancing, although she wasn't particularly good at it. Paul was surprised but agreed. He was even more surprised to see their company's owner, Brad Colson, at the party. Brad usually only attended the company picnic. At the party, Brad asked Jenny to dance multiple times, which she eagerly did while declining Paul's invitations. Just before midnight, as everyone prepared to celebrate the new year, Paul saw Brad kiss Jenny. Furious, Paul confronted them. The room went silent. Despite the risk of losing his job, Paul didn't hold back his anger. Jenny then shocked Paul by saying she was leaving with Brad just for one night and they would talk the next day. Stunned, Paul couldn't respond as he watched Jenny walk away with Brad. Brad and Jenny had left, and everyone was staring at me. It was incredibly embarrassing. I left immediately and went home. When I woke up on New Year's Day, I had a terrible hangover. I had spent the previous night crying, drinking, and barely sleeping. I was furious and started plotting revenge against Brad Carlson. I was convinced he had lured my wife away. I was planning what to say to Jenny when she came back. Despite everything, I wanted her back. I loved her deeply. Yet, I kept thinking of ways to get back at Brad. All my ideas were too violent, and I dismissed them because I didn't want to end up in jail over someone like Brad. A few hours later, I managed to ease my massive headache. I called the nanny and said I'd pick up Mark and Glenda soon. Then I started worrying. What if Jenny didn't come back? Or worse, what if she took the kids? Panicked, I hurried to pick them up. I wanted to be in a strong position when I talked to Jenny. The kids were glad to see me, but asked about their mom. Holding back tears, I lied that she was on a business trip. They were sad until I suggested pancakes at IHOP. While they ate, I made 2 lists, one for getting through this and another for a potential divorce. When I got home, Jenny wasn't there, which was both a relief and a disappointment. I wanted to fix things with her, but feared what might happen. Then I noticed the blinking light on the answering machine. Jenny had left a message. She said it was better to talk next week because she was emotional. She mentioned that Brad needed a secretary for a trip, and she went with him. I was furious and threw out the list about fixing our relationship. The pain was unbearable, much worse than any physical pain I'd ever felt. Betrayal by someone you trust deeply is hard to describe unless you've felt it. I felt like I could lose my mind, destroy things, or worse. But I pushed aside thoughts of harming myself because I loved my kids too much. However, dark thoughts still haunted me, including doubts about whether Mark and Glenda were really mine. I let the kids play outside while I planned for the future. The first thing on my list was a DNA test. I should have bought one during our meal out. I listed everything I could think of but knew I was probably missing some things. So I called a friend who'd been through a divorce to recommend a lawyer. He suggested his ex-wife's lawyer instead. I got the lawyer's name, Tom Watson, and called his office on New Year's, expecting to leave a message. To my surprise, Tom answered. I explained my situation quickly. When I mentioned Brad's name, Tom was intrigued and asked me to come in on Tuesday at 9 a.m. He advised me to bring the kids and gather all our financial documents, bank statements, birth certificates, and anything else important. He also wanted a detailed spending list. I gathered everything, including Jenny's message, and spent the day with the kids. That evening, we went for pizza, and I picked up a DNA test kit. I sent off the samples that night. The DNA results came back in 2 days, confirming the kids were mine. The next morning, I prepared the kids and headed to Tom Watson's office after calling off work for the week. Tom's office was bigger than I expected, and he led us into a large conference room. I took Mark and Glenda to the back of the room and handed them iPads to play educational games. Tom and I sat on the other side of the room at a conference table. While we talked, I cried twice as I shared how my wife went to a New Year's event with my boss. It was hard to accept she had left me behind. Tom listened and tried to comfort me, saying things would get better, but I felt too upset to believe him. After I shared my troubles, Tom handed me a photo across the table. He said, "Before you decide to hire me, you should know this. This is my cousin Abby with Joe Colson, Brad's brother. Joe left Abby for someone else. I tried to help her in their divorce, but we lost because Brad paid for a great legal team for Joe. They overpowered us with paperwork, and I was too inexperienced to handle it. It took me 5 years to partly fix that court decision. I learned a lot since then and became a better family lawyer, though I couldn't win fully for Abby. This made Brad upset. Now, as your lawyer, Brad will try hard against us because I'm involved, but I promise to give my best. I felt reassured to have Tom on my side, ready to fight. We spent the next 3 hours going over my documents, planning our steps and discussing my wishes, like keeping the house and other assets, and sorting out custody for the kids. Tom warned me to lower my expectations, but committed to striving for the best outcome. He asked if I wanted full custody of the children. I would if Jenny doesn't want them, but she loves them and will likely want full custody too. Maybe joint custody is fair, I said. Tom cautioned that Jenny might get primary custody because of Brad's money and their plans, possibly impacting my access to the kids. Still, we were determined to fight for fair visitation rights. As we wrapped up, Tom spoke with Mark and Glenda alone. He seemed pleased when he returned, telling me, "You must be a special dad because your kids really love you." Though they loved their mom too, their bond with me was strong. Leaving Tom's office, I felt financially secure, but worried about future time with my kids. Tom planned to draft a divorce petition and seek temporary custody. Jenny called the next day, wanting to meet after her trip. Despite Tom's predictions, I knew she wasn't seeking reconciliation. When she arrived, I was full of mixed emotions and didn't speak much. I asked about the kids, and Jenny tried to explain her actions, saying Brad had persuaded her that waiting would be worse. She claimed Brad was her true match, which hurt to hear. Expecting a discussion on our divorce, I cut to the chase. "Let's talk about the divorce so you don't waste my time." Angered by my bluntness, Jenny wasn't used to such talk. "I don't need to sit here and be insulted," she said. I replied, "Then leave," and walked out to the garden. I didn't really want her to go, but perhaps it was for the best. She hesitated, then said, "No, we should finish this." Jenny then awkwardly pulled out an envelope from her bag and handed it to me across the table. I opened it and started reading again. Tom was absolutely right. The terms Jenny offered seemed fair until I read the last part. At that moment, I was so angry I almost lost control. I tossed the papers at her. "Tell Brad Colson to forget it," I said. "I will never let him adopt my children, and offering me $100,000 to agree is just wrong. Mike, Brad, and I can give the kids a better life than you can." "Forget you, Jenny." She ignored my anger. "I'll be a stay-at-home mom, and they'll go to better schools. They'll live in a nicer house and travel more. You can't give them these things. To make it easier, Brad is willing to give you $250,000 to agree to the adoption, Jenny. You're being foolish." "What part of no didn't you understand?" I snapped back. "I bet Brad will raise his offer to $500,000, Jenny quickly said. "That's probably more than you'll ever have. We struggled with just your salary. And remember, Brad is your boss, and he could fire you any time." I wouldn't agree. I needed to calm down. I checked my watch, then focused again on Jenny. "I've thought a lot about our marriage, and it wasn't as good as you think. You might believe you're doing great, but you haven't been a good wife or mother lately, and we managed our money. But you always overspent because you wanted the best. I don't need anything from Brad. If he fires me, I'll have to deal with it. The court has given me temporary custody of the children because you weren't there for them." She was angry, but then the doorbell rang. "This is for you," I said, smiling as I went to answer it. I opened the door to see a deputy sheriff. I stepped aside so he could see Jenny behind me. He confirmed her identity and handed her an envelope, officially notifying her of the divorce. I smiled as she read the divorce papers and then ran off crying. "She just left after getting the notice," I told Tom on the phone. "You behaved, right?" Tom asked. "It was tough, but I managed," I replied. Jenny left in tears after the meeting. "You were right about their proposal," I continued. "But they added something unexpected that almost pushed me too far. Brad wants to adopt my children, which just isn't right." "It's a tough situation," Tom admitted. "Getting your parental rights terminated would be really hard unless they prove you're unfit. So you need to be very careful with how you act around your wife and Brad. Have witnesses around if possible. I wouldn't be surprised if Brad concocted a story against you. You're a good father. Just remember they might twist things to make you look bad." "Now that we know their plan, we'll prepare," Tom said. "Will it ever get easier?" I asked, feeling the pain of Jenny leaving anew. "Yes, it will. Tom replied instantly. "And you're already feeling less destroyed than when Jenny first left. But expect ups and downs for a while and be ready to lose some battles. But we'll keep fighting," he added like they said in the 60s. "Keep the faith, buddy." During the week off, I took Tom's advice and did all the financial preparations. I opened new accounts in my name and moved half our funds there. I enrolled the twins in an after-school program. Their school had a program that kept kids until 5:30 p.m., which worked well since I worked from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. This gave me time to run errands and still pick up the kids on time. The week also allowed me to set a new routine for the kids. Jenny had been lax about bedtimes, but I needed a stricter schedule. I bathed them, brushed their teeth, and had them in bed by 8 p.m. At first they resisted, but they liked it when I promised to read 2 stories instead of 1. Spending time with my children was saving me. We grew even closer. They didn't ask about their mom as much, but one day Mark asked if she would ever come back. I didn't want to lie or hurt them, so I told them the truth. Their mom had found someone else and wanted to live with him, and she even wanted him to be their new dad. Both kids cried, and I regretted saying so much. I quickly reassured them that I would always be their dad. They calmed down and gave me big hugs. On Saturday, we went to their writing lessons. Despite not seeing their mother for over a week, Mark and Glenda were excited to see Miss Darla. Writing lessons were my idea, which Jenny hadn't supported. Like many girls, Mark joined the writing lessons because he didn't want to feel left out. He quickly became a much better rider than his sister. Darla Lampson, who owned a stable, was their riding instructor. Everyone loved her because she was kind and always smiling. I liked her the first time we met. Jenny teased me, saying I liked Darla because she laughed at my jokes, which was true. Darla was easy to like. One day at the stable, Darla asked about my wife. I told her we were getting a divorce. Darla apologized for asking. I reassured her it was okay and mentioned I hoped we could still come for riding lessons with the kids. I explained that I might not get to see the kids as often after the divorce because the court might give Jenny more time with them. Jenny planned to marry her rich boyfriend, which meant she could stay home with the kids while I might need to hire help. And worst of all, I worked for her boyfriend, Brad, so I was worried about my job too. Darla recognized Brad's name and mentioned she had trouble with him too. He wanted part of her land for free just to separate their properties with trees and bushes. Darla ended up giving him the land to avoid more legal costs. She disliked Brad because of this. I agreed, hoping both Brad and Jenny would eventually face consequences for their actions. Darla then asked what I'd do if Brad fired me. I told her I was already doing accounting work on the side and was planning to expand it. I might have to move to an apartment after the divorce, which would make running a business tough. Darla offered me to handle her ranch's bookkeeping for the same fee she was currently paying. I hesitated, saying only if I found her current accountants were overcharging her. After checking her books, I realized they were indeed charging too much. I offered a much lower rate, which surprised Darla, but she insisted on paying the full amount. I refused, wanting to charge only what was fair. Darla was grateful as she'd been struggling since taking over the ranch. She even offered free riding lessons for the kids in return, which I tried to decline, but she insisted. Getting Darla as a client helped, but my divorce was getting complicated, and the public attention on Jenny and Brad made things harder. I felt lonely and stressed, despite a good start to my day with a new client. The challenges just seemed to keep coming. When I arrived at work, I found out I was fired. I wasn't surprised. Things had been awkward since the New Year's Eve party. Conversations stopped when I walked into a room. Losing my job was tough, especially knowing Brad was behind it. Tom was ready with documents for a wrongful termination case, but he said it would be a long fight. Tom also released a statement about my dispute with Brad, which really upset him. Later that day, Tom told me the judge had granted Jenny joint custody starting that evening. I was upset until Tom explained that it wasn't as bad as it sounded. The kids would stay at home, and although Jenny could too, she chose not to. She had to pick up the kids after school, and I would pick them up in the evening. Seeing Jenny and Brad together every evening was hard. She made sure I saw how happy she was with Brad, which left me feeling down and the kids confused. Things got even worse. Jenny's lawyers tried to move the kids to Brad's home, claiming I was keeping the kids from her. Tom quickly responded in court, defending my right to see the children and suggesting the judge talk to them directly. The children often asked their mom when she would visit. The judge decided the kids would stay put for now, but didn't address the accusations against me. Tom was concerned the judge wasn't focusing enough on our case. Later, the judge ordered us to switch babysitting every 2 weeks, thinking it would be fair for the kids to split time between homes. At first, I thought this would inconvenience Jenny since the school was far from Brad's house, but I underestimated them. I realized I never truly knew Jenny after she left me at Brad's party. Letting go is hard when you love someone deeply. The first time Jenny took the kids, she seemed nervous but firm. As they drove away, she turned to me and said, "Please don't make the divorce hard. I still care about you and don't want Brad to hurt you. If you let him adopt the kids, you can still see them, but don't ruin things with Brad." I was stunned. I thought she was just unfaithful, but she was also manipulative. "Forget it," I said and walked away, but I heard her warn me as I left. I immediately called Tom and told him about her threat. Tom wasn't surprised and asked if I had set up cameras around the house yet. I had cameras inside, but was installing more outside the next day. Tom was glad, but reminded me that we needed to be ready for any false accusations from Brad's side. The days the kids spent with Jenny were tough. Brad and Jenny were often in the social pages or on TV, and the kids were usually with them, looking happy in all the photos. It felt like Brad was slowly taking my children away. 8 weeks later, I faced a big shock. The school called to say my kids, Mark and Glenda, were missing. I called Jenny, worried. "Are the kids sick?" I asked. "No, why?" she responded coolly. When I mentioned the school, she nonchalantly said, "Oh, I moved them to a better school near my house." "You can't just do that," I said angrily. "I can, and I did," she snapped and hung up. I called Tom in despair. He said we'd fight the move, but the judge might allow it since the new school was highly rated. I learned that courts always try to do what's best for the kids, even if it sends the wrong message. In this situation, it seemed like the kid's mother could do whatever she wanted, and their father felt powerless. Tom, my lawyer, warned me that things could get worse. He felt this was just the beginning of trouble from Brad and Jenny. Thankfully, Tom had insisted on setting up security cameras around our house, which proved to be a smart move. On Tuesday, Tom challenged the decision to change the kids' school. But the next day, Jenny's lawyers accused me of hurting our daughter. I was so upset, but Tom calmed me down before I did something rash. An emergency court hearing was called, and I wasn't allowed to see my kids until they figured things out. There was even talk of serious legal charges. Tom quickly got a court order to learn more about these accusations. He demanded Jenny's lawyers specify when and where the alleged incidents happened. At first, Jenny's lawyers didn't want to give details, saying it would upset the kids. However, the judge wasn't fooled. He'd seen similar tactics before. He sternly told Jenny's lawyer that if the accusations were true, he'd take serious action. But if they were making things up, it would backfire on them. Jenny's lawyer, Mr. Silas, looked worried and agreed to provide the information. They sent over some dates and times, but no details of what supposedly happened. I was angry they were still trying to mess with my life, but Tom was confident we could prove them wrong. He got the security company to check the video footage from our home. The videos clearly showed me helping the twins after their baths and reading to them before bed. There was nothing wrong in the videos. At the hearing, the judge was very serious about the seriousness of harming a child. Jenny's lawyer said the children had told their mom something bad. The judge then asked Tom for our side. Tom stated that the accusation was false and asked for consequences for Jenny if we proved it. He then wanted to show the court security footage to support our case. Mr. Silas objected, questioning the authenticity of the videos. The judge explained how secure our home security system was, showing confidence in the footage's reliability. When they watched the videos, it was clear that the accusations were baseless. The judge then spoke privately with my children. Afterward, he decided it was all a big misunderstanding. Glenda had said I hugged and kissed them, which was true but harmless. The judge warned Jenny not to make such claims lightly again. Mr. Silas then brought up the school change issue. The judge, after considering everything, decided the new school was better, based on feedback from the kids. I avoided serious trouble but felt like I still lost in a big way. Tom told me straight up that the judge's decision wasn't great. When I got to work, they told me I was fired. I wasn't too surprised and actually felt a bit relieved. After the New Year's Eve party, things had been very awkward at work. Though nobody said anything directly, I could feel the tension whenever I entered a room. Still, losing my job was tough, especially since I knew Brad was behind it. Tom had already prepared documents to take to the Employment Commission for wrongful termination, but he warned me it could be a long and hard fight. Tom also released a statement about my conflict with Brad, which really upset him. Later, Tom called to tell me the judge had granted Jenny shared custody of our kids starting that evening. I was upset until Tom explained it wasn't all bad. The kids would stay at our house, but Jenny could also live there if she wanted. She chose not to, opting instead to pick up the kids each day after school, and I would pick them up each evening. This arrangement was tough for me because I had to see Jenny and Brad together every evening, which was really hard. Things seemed to get even worse when Jenny's lawyers tried to move the kids permanently to Brad's house, claiming I was blocking her visits with them. They also said I was trying to turn the kids against her. Tom quickly countered in court, asserting I never denied Jenny access to the kids. He suggested the judge talk directly to them, who often asked their mom when she would visit. Unfortunately, the judge's decision was to keep things as they were for now. Tom was worried the judge wasn't focusing enough on our case since he was handling dozens of cases at the same time. Then the judge decided we should alternate looking after the kids every 2 weeks, meaning they would move back and forth between our homes. Initially, I thought this would be hard for Jenny since the kids' school was far from Brad's place. However, I underestimated how clever Jenny and Brad could be. I should have realized I never really knew Jenny, especially after how things went down at Brad's New Year's party. It's difficult to let go when you still love someone. When Jenny first took the kids under the new arrangement, she seemed nervous but resolute. As they drove away, she turned to me and asked me not to complicate the divorce proceedings. She said she still cared and didn't want Brad to hurt me. She suggested that if I let Brad adopt the kids, I could still see them. But she also made it clear she wouldn't let me interfere with her relationship with Brad. I was shocked. I thought she was just unfaithful, but she was also manipulative. "No way," I said, and walked back into the house. As I left, I heard her warn me again. I immediately called Tom and told him about her words. Tom wasn't surprised and asked if I had set up cameras around the house yet. I had cameras inside but was adding more outside the next day. Tom was glad but reminded me that we needed to be prepared for any false claims from Brad's side. The days the kids were with Jenny were difficult. Brad and Jenny were often in the social pages or on TV, and the kids were usually with them, looking happy. It felt like Brad was slowly taking my children away. 8 weeks later, there was a major shock. The school called to say my kids, Mark and Glenda, were missing. I called Jenny, worried. "Are the kids sick?" I asked. "No, why?" she responded coolly. When I mentioned the school, she casually said, "Oh, I moved them to a better school near my house." "You can't just do that," I said angrily. "I can, and I did," she snapped and hung up. I called Tom in despair. He said we'd fight the move, but the judge might allow it since the new school was highly rated. I learned that courts always try to do what's best for the kids, even if it sends the wrong message. The situation was tough, because it seemed like the children's mother could do whatever she wanted and their father felt powerless. Tom, who was helping with the legal matters, warned that more trouble might come from Jenny and Brad. Thankfully, Tom had set up security cameras, which was proving to be very helpful. During a court session, Tom defended against claims that Mr. Wilson was not capable of caring for his children. He pointed out that Mr. Wilson could financially support his children and himself, despite claims to the contrary. Tom also explained that Mr. Wilson was starting his own business, which was doing well. Furthermore, Mr. Wilson was planning to remarry and live in a good school district, which would be beneficial for the children. Tom argued for Mr. Wilson to have joint or primary custody of the children. During the session, Jenny looked shocked and Brad was visibly angry. The judge then decided to talk to the children before making a final decision. This made me very anxious. After speaking with them, the judge said that deciding custody was one of the hardest parts of his job. He wished he could let the children live with both parents. He concluded that both parents provided a good home and could keep the children in the same school. The children had expressed a desire to spend time with both parents, so the judge granted joint custody. The children would alternate every 2 weeks between their parents, starting with their mother. The parents lived close to each other, so exchanging the children would be easy. The judge finalized the divorce and mentioned that the property was being sold and the proceeds would be split equally. I was relieved and pretended this was what I expected. I hugged the children and then walked over to where Jenny and Brad were upset with their lawyer, Mr. Silas, about the outcome. Jenny and Brad were still upset and made a rude comment. I ignored their insults and confirmed the pickup time for the children to avoid any misunderstandings. Jenny angrily confirmed the time. Brad threatened me, but I avoided confrontation, knowing it could hurt their custody arrangement. Jenny pulled Brad away, trying to prevent further conflict. Suddenly I realized my 2 kids were hugging my leg and yelling at Brad, "Don't hurt our dad!" Jenny looked at me briefly, then turned to calm the kids down. "It's okay, kids. Mr. Cox, Mr. Carlson, and your dad were just joking around. Let's go get some ice cream." As they walked away, I called out to Jenny, "I'll be there at 2 o'clock, 2 weeks from Sunday." Jenny just stared back without responding. On the scheduled day, I picked up the kids and we went to the movies and had dinner with Miss Darla. Thankfully, Brad's lawyers couldn't change our arrangement. The kids loved living on the ranch with Miss Darla. They rode horses all the time and loved her cooking. Back when Jenny and I were married, I did most of the cooking since Jenny barely knew how. 30 days after the judge's decision, Darla and I got married in court with the kids and some friends as witnesses. A week after our wedding, Jenny and Brad's wedding made the public pages of the newspaper. Jenny looked very happy, but seeing my children smiling next to them was tough. Tom had said the pain would fade, but those first months proved him wrong. There were days the pain eased a little, but my nights were often filled with loneliness. For 6 months, I kept trying to think of a way to get back at them, but nothing seemed right without risking serious trouble. Jenny's new life seemed perfect in every newspaper photo, which hurt even more. In my lowest moments, I considered turning my kids against their mom, but I loved them too much to do that. Despite everything, my kids seemed happy with their new situation, enjoying life with both their mom and me. They always talked about how amazing Brad's place was with its pool, game room, and mini movie theater. About 3 months after the divorce, Jenny started trying to turn Glenda and Mark against me by implying I wasn't a good dad because I didn't spend as much as Brad. When Darla heard, she was furious and urged me to talk to the kids. So the next time they were with me, I sat them down and asked, "Do you guys think I'm a bad dad because I don't spend as much money as Brad and your mom?" Mark hesitantly replied, "That's what Mom says." I explained that I couldn't afford everything they could because I wasn't as rich as Mr. Carlson. I told them I loved them deeply and they didn't have to stay with me if the gifts were important to them. Glenda started crying. "No, Dad, I don't want to be with Mom all the time. I want to stay with you too." Mark agreed, tears in his eyes. I'm not sure what the kids told Jenny when they went back, but she showed up at the ranch furious, accusing me of making them upset about her. I refused to argue and shut the door in her face. Jenny then started planning special trips for the kids during my time with them, like a trip to Disneyland. They begged me to let them go, and I reluctantly agreed. Darla taught me how to handle it next time. When they wanted to go to New York during my week, I suggested swapping weeks with Jenny, which she refused. The kids were upset with her, not me. Score 1 for us. It was a stressful and sad time, but I had a lot of support. Darla was always there, and surprisingly, Jenny's parents, John and Alma, became close allies. Jenny hadn't invited them to her wedding because she was embarrassed by them, but Darla and I welcomed them warmly to our ranch. We discovered that John was a war hero with several medals, but Jenny was ashamed of him due to his disabilities. From then on, we made sure to invite John and Alma over whenever the kids were with us. Jenny didn't bother to see her parents, which upset me greatly. It was clear she had little regard for the people who should have mattered most. Mark and Glenda got to know their grandparents better during visits to the ranch. I also learned something new. John had been a cowboy before his time in Vietnam. He even taught me to ride, which helped me bond with my kids. I read a lot about divorce and co-parenting. One great tip I found was to give kids experiences instead of just gifts. Darla was great at coming up with fun activities. We explored local places, went hiking, bowled, and played mini-golf. Darla even helped organize a mini rodeo, which was a hit with Mark and Glenda. They were thrilled to lead the parade. And despite Jenny trying to tempt them with a trip to Disneyland, they chose to stay for the rodeo. It was such a success that it became an annual event. In the year after the divorce, Jenny kept trying to win over the kids. Sometimes she'd plan things with her and Brad that made the kids miss days with me. It hurt, but I never showed it to the kids. Every night they were with me, I'd read to them before bed, switching to chapter books as they grew older. Life with Darla was joyful. She was always cheerful and kind, and working from her office let me grow my accounting business. My income wasn't quite what it was when I worked for Brad, but it was getting there. Brad seemed to realize he couldn't replace me as the kids' father, which made him less interested in them. He focused more on Jenny, often taking her on trips abroad. At first, I worried about the kids traveling internationally, fearing they might not return. But Darla assured me the risk of a scandal was too high for Brad. Eventually, I agreed, and the kids loved the trips. When one trip got extended, Jenny surprisingly sent the kids back to me on their own. The first anniversary of my divorce passed without me even noticing, until Tom checked in. Most of the hard feelings had faded. I felt a bit guilty for not celebrating the anniversary with Darla, given all her support, so I bought her flowers and took her out, which made her very happy. As time went on, Darla seemed a bit down. I thought maybe my welcome was wearing out, so I started looking for a new place. I found a townhouse in the Chesterton School District. It was tough thinking about moving from the ranch and missing the life there. Meanwhile, Darla expanded the ranch, adding 200 acres and developing trails that attracted people for weekend rides. She started offering summer camps for kids, which were a big hit, and built cabins for adults who wanted the ranch experience. Her business was now very successful. My own business grew too. I hired staff and my earnings were much better than when I worked for Brad. Eventually, Brad's company settled a legal dispute with me. I decided to settle rather than drag it out, and they paid me $250,000. I gave Tom half for his help and saved the rest to buy a new home and set up an office. I told Darla about my plans while the kids were with their mom. "Thank you so much," I started, feeling really sad. "You really helped me when I was afraid I'd lose Mark and Glenda. It was a big help, and now our agreement is ending. I found a temporary place to stay until I can buy my own house. I hope I can still use the office here for another month since my office lease isn't sorted out yet." I wasn't sure how she would react. Maybe she'd feel relieved, but instead Darla burst into tears and ran to her bedroom. I was shocked and unsure what to do. I tried to talk to her through her door, but she didn't answer. That night, I went to bed feeling really troubled. Darla and I had a marriage in name only. We were never romantic. I really cared about her. She was everything Jenny wasn't. I was always careful not to upset her, so I kept my distance, only giving her a hug or a quick kiss on the cheek. We lived like roommates. I decided to talk to her in the morning, but then, around midnight, a big thunderstorm hit. Lightning struck close by, shaking the house and waking me up. Then Darla came into my room. "Michelle, please, I'm so scared of thunderstorms," she whispered, shaking. "Can I stay here tonight?" "Of course," I said, and moved over to make room for her. She was shaking and, to my surprise, not wearing any clothes. "Mike, the thunder and lightning scare me," she said, trembling. I comforted her, and before I knew it, we were kissing. Things moved quickly from there. "Please, Mike, I need you tonight," she whispered. In that moment, I realized I had deep feelings for Darla. It wasn't the fiery kind of love I had for Jenny, but something deeper, more mature. Being with Darla that night felt like it healed something in me. Afterward, I told her, "Darla, I don't know if this is love, but I do know I don't want to leave." At first, I only saw us as friends, but my feelings grew stronger over time. I was scared to make a move before, worried she wouldn't feel the same. "Mike, I've loved you since we first met," she replied. "But you were married, and then when you weren't, I hoped we'd really be together." That night changed everything. After talking, we felt completely committed to each other. The next morning, the sky was clear and so was my view of life. The pain and anger from my past were gone. I no longer felt heartache when I thought of Jenny. Instead, I felt nothing at all. What started as a fake marriage turned into real love. We decided to go on a honeymoon. I expected Darla to pick a fancy place, but she chose Montana because she always wanted to see the ranch her dad loved. "Why Montana?" I asked. "My dad always loved it there, but hated the winters," she explained. We spent 2 weeks exploring Montana, and it was wonderful, especially our nights together. When we picked up the kids, they were upset. Jenny and Brad had gone to Europe and left them with a strict nanny who barely let them do anything fun. When Jenny came to get them, I tried to talk to her. "Jenny, the kids said you were in Europe. Just so you know, we can take the kids if you need to travel again," I said, trying to keep things calm. "It's none of your business, Mike," she snapped. "I'm not trying to start anything. I just wanted to offer our help instead of using a nanny. We were away this time, but usually we can take them," I explained. The custody agreement was clear, but I wanted her to know we were willing to help. Mark and Glenda enjoyed getting to know their grandparents at the ranch. I discovered that John had been a cowboy before serving in Vietnam. He even got me into riding, which brought me closer to my kids. I read a lot about divorce and co-parenting, learning that experiences are better gifts for children than material things. Darla was great at creating fun activities. We explored local spots, hiked, bowled, and played mini-golf. She even helped organize a mini rodeo that became a hit and a yearly event. Despite our divorce, Jenny tried to sway the kids by planning activities during my time with them. It hurt, but I never let it show. I kept up our routine of reading books each night. Life with Darla was happy, and I managed to grow my accounting business. Brad, however, started showing less interest in the kids as he focused on Jenny, often taking her on trips abroad. Initially, I was worried about the kids traveling internationally, but Darla reassured me. The kids enjoyed these trips and talked about them excitedly. During one of Jenny's trips, I found out she was away again without telling me. Tom, my lawyer, suggested we adjust the custody terms. Jenny was furious when she found out and threatened to fight it in court. At the hearing, her lawyer argued that the current arrangement was fine, but Tom explained that it made more sense for the kids to stay with me when Jenny was away. The judge agreed and changed the custody terms in my favor. After the hearing, Jenny confronted me angrily. I tried to reason with her, explaining it was better for the kids to stay with me when she wasn't around. She didn't take it well and stormed off. Tom suggested that Jenny struggled with not being in control and feared the kids might prefer being with me. 2 years later, Darla and I welcomed a baby girl, Wendy, and later a son, Stephen. Glenda and Mark loved their new siblings, and the next few years flew by. Jenny and Brad traveled a lot, and Jenny's contact with her parents dwindled to occasional dinners. In contrast, Darla and I often invited them over, and I valued my relationship with them, especially enjoying John's stories about his varied life experiences. Jenny seemed indifferent to her parents, which hurt them. I tried discussing it with her, but she dismissed me. I kept up with Jenny and Brad's life through social media, curious about their marriage, which seemed stable. The kids reported that life at Brad's was good and he treated them well. Sadly, 8 years post-divorce, Alma passed away from cancer. She spent her last days with us on the ranch. The funeral was held locally and drew a large crowd. The ranch had its own private cemetery from the 1870s, and John asked if he could bury Alma there. We agreed immediately. He also asked to be buried next to her one day, and we agreed to that as well. I wasn't sure if Jenny would come since she hadn't talked to her dad much since her mom passed away, except for when he called to tell her about the death. But Jenny did come, and she brought Brad with her. Jenny wore a dark blue dress and sunglasses. I noticed Brad looked different. His hair was thinning and graying, and he had started to get a bit of a belly. It seemed like he was traveling too much and not taking care of himself. When Jenny and her dad saw each other, it was awkward. They just stood there for a long while until John hugged her. Jenny hesitated, but then she hugged him back. Brad came over and shook John's hand to offer his condolences. Mark and Glenda, who had been crying, hugged their mom. Brad nodded and grinned at me, probably thinking I'd be uncomfortable. Instead, I smiled and shook his hand. When we went to sit down, there wasn't enough room in the front row, so I suggested Brad and I sit in the second row. Brad wasn't pleased, especially when John insisted I sit next to him. Darla took my place in the second row next to Brad as the service started. I heard Brad grumbling behind me, and Darla snapped something back at him. Eventually, Brad got up and left. After the service, John invited Jenny and Brad back to the ranch for the burial and some food, but Jenny said they had to fly out, which I knew wasn't true. I later asked Darla what happened between her and Brad during the service. She told me Brad was upset that I was sitting in the front row next to his wife. I explained to Brad that Jenny and I weren't sitting together, but he didn't take it well. Darla told him off, saying he needed to stop thinking the world revolved around him. We laughed about it, but Brad's type doesn't take disrespect lightly. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to claim 10 acres of Darla's ranch, saying it was never officially part of the ranch due to a clerical error and no taxes had been paid on it. He paid some back taxes and asked for a tax deed. Darla was upset, especially since that land wasn't very valuable. She wondered if she should just let it go. I told her absolutely not. Brad was just trying to push her around because she stood up to him. Previously, Darla didn't have the funds to fight back, but this time we were ready. The court ruled in Darla's favor, saying the county should have given her a chance to pay the back taxes and that they would only go back 5 years for taxes. I didn't see Brad in person for a while after that. I saw him and Jenny in the newspapers sometimes. Jenny rarely met me when I picked up the kids. Usually a staff member was there instead. As the years went by, Brad traveled more, and I ended up having the kids for about 9 months of the year. They started to dislike going back to their mom's house because Brad was often in a bad mood and Jenny wasn't home much. Then the news broke that Brad had filed for divorce from Jenny, allegedly because he caught her cheating with a richer, younger man named Ted Dumont. Jenny seemed to be climbing the social ladder once more. Darla and I found the whole situation ironic. After the divorce, Jenny married Ted, which was fine by me since Ted didn't like kids much, meaning Glenda and Mark essentially lived with us full-time. After Alma's death, I convinced John to sell his house and move in with us. John, who knew a lot about construction, helped Darla with some renovations on the ranch. We decided to expand the house to add a dining room for the ranch staff and a bigger office for me. This led to another dispute with Brad as he tried to block our building permits, but eventually we got them because of our inheritable rights. John did most of the construction work himself. A little over a year after Ted and Jenny married, Jenny filed for divorce due to rumors that Ted was unfaithful. Another rumor, which turned out to be true, suggested that Ted had married Jenny just to get back at Brad by taking his wife. I often reflect on my blessings when I wake up each day. Over the years, we experienced both good times and a terrible tragedy. Mark was lucky to survive a car accident with just a broken leg and wrist, along with some cuts. John had a mild stroke that left him with a slight paralysis on his left side, but physiotherapy helped him recover well. Darla, busy with the ranch and our 4 kids, seemed to never get sick. I, however, felt unwell for weeks with no energy and constant headaches, until Darla insisted I see a doctor. Tests revealed a severely blocked artery, and I underwent successful triple bypass surgery. Glenda and Alma only had common childhood illnesses, but sadly, Stevie passed away from cancer at age 7. He was brave and didn't complain even when in pain. The night he died, Darla and I stayed by his side, comforting him until he peacefully passed away. Losing Stevie was the darkest day of my life, far worse than any betrayal from Jenny. It took a long time for Darla and me to begin to heal from our loss. The pain started to ease when Glenda gave birth to a boy named Stephen Todd after her brother and her husband. All our children are now married with 7 grandchildren, each bringing some healing. However, I still feel a pang of sadness when I think of Stevie. We buried him next to his grandmother. About 300 people were expected at his service, except Jenny, who was traveling. I was relieved she didn't attend. I couldn't have faced her. The months after Stevie's death were tough. Sometimes I found Darla had gone to his grave at night. I would join her, and we'd sit together for comfort. Even years later, I sometimes talked to Stevie at his grave, finding solace there. I never considered reconciling with Jenny, even after she was free again. One evening, Darla asked if I ever thought about going back to Jenny. To reassure her, I showed her my love passionately. One day, Brad visited my office looking unwell. He revealed he had stage 4 cancer and wanted to apologize for his past actions, admitting he had been wrong. Although I once hated him, I felt only sympathy at that moment and forgave him. He passed away 5 months later, and Darla and I attended his funeral, which was sparsely attended. Jenny was there, visibly upset, making a bitter remark towards me. The local funeral for Alma attracted many people. John wanted to bury her in the ranch's old cemetery from the 1870s, and he also asked to be buried next to her someday. We agreed to both requests. I wasn't sure if Jenny would come since she hadn't talked much to her dad since her mom passed, except to hear of her death. But she showed up with Brad, dressed in a dark blue dress and sunglasses. Brad looked older, with thinning, graying hair and a bit of a belly. Their meeting was tense and quiet until John hugged Jenny. She hesitated but eventually returned the embrace. Brad shook John's hand and expressed his condolences. The kids, Mark and Glenda, were tearful and hugged their mom. Brad nodded at me, perhaps expecting me to be uncomfortable, but I smiled and shook his hand. When we tried to sit down, the front pew was too small, so I suggested Brad and I sit in the second row. Brad wasn't happy, especially when John insisted I sit next to him. Darla took my seat in the second row next to Brad as the service started, and I heard him grumbling about the seating arrangement. After the service, John invited Jenny and Brad back to the ranch for the burial and some food, but Jenny said they had to fly out, which I knew wasn't true. Later, I asked Darla what happened during the service. She told me Brad was upset that I sat in the front row near his wife, so she told him off. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to claim 10 acres of Darla's ranch due to a clerical error. He even paid the back taxes and asked for a tax deed. Darla was worried and wondered if she should just give up the land. I encouraged her to fight it, explaining that Brad was just trying to push her around. The court eventually sided with Darla, acknowledging the county's mistake in not assessing the taxes and limiting any tax debt to 5 years. Brad's will surprised everyone by leaving most of his fortune to charities and his college, but he also left $2 million to Jenny. Despite her wealth, Jenny bought a condo near the ranch and tried to reconnect with her kids, who didn't enjoy staying at her condo because it was dull. I told them to give their mom a chance, but the distance was too much, and Jenny soon moved on to a new boyfriend and then several more over the years. Our kids did well. Mark graduated from Georgia Tech and lives in Austin with his wife Cindy and their 2 girls. Linda became a veterinarian, married Todd, and they now have 3 kids. They spend a lot of time at our ranch. Alma became a 3rd-grade teacher and married her college boyfriend. They're expecting a child soon. I'm so proud of our grandchildren. They are a joy, and we get to spoil them and then send them home. Mark met his wife Sally while on vacation. She's American, petite, with long dark hair and unique purple eyes. They have 3 kids, and she's expecting another. Years have passed, and Darla and I celebrated our 30th anniversary. Jenny's life has slowed down, and she doesn't see her kids much. Her father, John, nearing 90, still has a sharp wit, but his conversations with Jenny are short and leave him sad. As Christmas approached, I went to the mall for gift shopping, opting for gift cards to avoid any issues with choosing the wrong gifts. After buying the last card, I headed for a snack, but spotted Jenny sitting alone, looking older and lonely. I approached her to say hello, but she initially reacted harshly. Realizing she was upset, I started to leave, but she softened and asked me to stay. The holidays always seem to stir up tension. "Please sit down. I'd like some company. Are you shopping for Christmas?" I asked as I took a bite of my chicken sandwich. "Mike, I haven't done any Christmas shopping since Brad and I divorced. Now I just send checks. The kids and grandkids really appreciate them, especially since they use the money for college," Jenny said, watching a young couple with a baby stroller pass by. "So what brought you to the mall? I remember you never liked shopping much," I continued. "I just wanted to be around people," Jenny replied, her eyes following another family. "Everyone in my building is away for the holidays. What about you? What are your plans for Christmas?" I asked. "Oh, I'm not going to be alone. I've booked a dinner at Chez Francesca and plan to see the new Tom Hanks movie," Jenny said. "No, you won't," I interjected. "You're coming to the ranch for Christmas. Everyone will be there, including your dad." It'll be fun." "I can't do that," Jenny protested. "It might make everyone uncomfortable." "Nonsense," I said as I cleaned up. "You're coming. If you want to see the kids open presents, come at 7, but any time is fine. Lunch is at 3. Darla wasn't thrilled when I mentioned Jenny might come for Christmas. "Why did you invite her?" she asked, a hint of jealousy in her tone. "I couldn't let her be alone on Christmas," I explained. When I told John, his face lit up, although he tried to hide his excitement. Jenny hesitated because she thought she'd be an awkward presence, but I assured her it was her choice to make. On Christmas Day, Jenny didn't show for the morning or lunch. By the afternoon, it seemed she might not come at all, which saddened John. I sent Christy, my youngest granddaughter, to cheer him up with a game of Candyland. To everyone's surprise, Jenny arrived around 5:30, dressed up as if for a dinner. "Hi," I greeted her warmly. I was starting to lose hope. "I still think I might be intruding," she said, unsure. "Not at all," I reassured her. "You missed lunch, but there's still dessert." "That sounds great," Jenny replied as we went inside. "Hey everyone, look who's here for dessert," I announced. The grandkids were excited and immediately involved Jenny in their games. Mark, Glenda, and all the kids greeted her warmly. Even Darla embraced her, which eased the tension. The evening went smoothly, and it was heartwarming to see Jenny laughing and talking with her father. Despite her initial nerves, Jenny began to relax, realizing she wasn't out of place. As the night wound down and the grandkids went to bed, the adults decided to relax by the fireplace, opting out of a cold dip in the hot tub. We enjoyed the warmth in silence until Jenny, tears in her eyes, broke the quiet. "I almost didn't come tonight. I was scared of facing what I'd lost. I really messed up my life," she confessed. Darla, surprised, responded gently, "I've seen your photos with Brad and Ted. It's clear there was love. But remember, not all marriages last. Half of them end in divorce." Jenny added softly, "I loved Brad initially, and part of me still loved you, Mike. But I was drawn more to his wealth and status. We had good years together, but I let him push me away from our kids. Since he was 15 years older than me, his age started showing through his health issues, which also affected our relationship. He got cranky and upset often. About 6 months before I met Ted, I started seeing other people. Brad looked at me with pain and anger, the same look I saw in your eyes, Mike, when we were married. I found out Ted was also unfaithful, and he just laughed when I confronted him. He admitted he married me just to upset Brad, which left me heartbroken. I realized then how you and Brad must have felt when I left. After that, I decided I was done with marriage and wanted to just enjoy life, as I had enough money to do what I wanted. I jumped from one meaningless relationship to another, always putting my desires above my children's needs. I'm surprised they don't hate me. That was the closest thing to an apology from Jenny. After sitting quietly for a while, Jenny finished her drink and stood up to leave. Darla, John, and I tried to get her to stay the night, but she wanted to go. John and I walked her to the car. He hugged her tightly and told her he loved her, which made her cry again. She quickly wiped away her tears, hugged me tightly, thanked me, and drove off. I'm not sure what the future holds for us. I think Jenny really regrets many of her past decisions. Whether she tries to reconnect with her family is up to her. Now, the house is mostly quiet, just the occasional crackling from the fireplace breaking the silence. I thought about how sad Jenny seemed, and I felt sorry for her. I regretted all the time I spent trying to get back at her and Brad. Sitting by the fire, I thought of a Bible verse. "The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the knowledgeable, but time and chance happen to them all." In the end, time turned out to be the best form of revenge. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.